topic then takes that on again about implementing this technology in the workplace with a real case study. From Flowscape and from WSP, please welcome Peter Reigo and Claire Callan.
Okay, so we're going to talk about a joint project that we're working with, and I'm Peter Reigo. I'm the CEO and founder of Flowscape, and Flowscape is a workplace management solution company from Sweden, so now you know the accent as well.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I'm Claire Callan. I work at WSP on the Smart Places team, so within the Property and Buildings group. My area of focus, user experience, smart strategy, and if you're not familiar with WSP, we're a fairly large company, global engineering consultancy, and we design future-ready places that take into account not just the physical engineering and building, but also the socio-cultural changes that will influence our buildings and shape how we use them. So, click that forward. As a company, we have a target to halve the carbon footprint of our designs by 2030. We know that these buildings that we're building will stand for a very long time. And I think, as we heard in the previous panel, we know that current building guidelines just don't go far enough to get us to the net zero goals that we need to hit. So we're here to tell you about a particular project that's very exciting, where a small change in thinking is letting our client operate their building in a much more energy-aware manner. So, just to set the context, I thought I'd talk about what we hear from clients when they talk about technology in buildings. So, when clients come to us, they're typically thinking about three contextual drivers. So the first is using technology to kind of measure and monitor how they use environmental resources. And I love the statistic in the previous chat about, there's 15 to 20% of a win in there. If you can just understand what's happening and do things better, you can operate your building so much more efficiently. And the focus on this has only gone up with the advent of war in Europe and the huge increase that we've all seen in the energy prices. So we're seeing that impetus to run your building more efficiently really coming through in our client conversations. The second driver is that it's now much more efficient, cost efficient, to deploy technology at scales in buildings, like how Mark highlighted with his nice example from Leeds. The data that you can bring together, you can combine it to get useful insights, and you can target even more efficiency across a range of different areas. And the third driver we typically see is that users really do now expect to be able to access and control all the services in their lives in a digital way, and that includes the buildings that they work in. We've also seen a key change in how users expect to use their buildings. We've talked a lot today about hybrid. Working from home during the pandemic only accelerated something that was really already happening, as Tim said. In London and the UK have, for the most part, returned to normal, but we've seen this huge structural change in Fridays. And I thought, it's after lunch, we've all been sitting down, I'm going to ask you guys to briefly stand up. Again, we're getting used to this today, right? So, if you work in an office during the week, any office, I'd like you to stay standing. So if you work 100% from home, you can sit down. So I can see most of the room still on their feet. And then, if you're going to work in that office this Friday, stay standing. Good. So a nice visual representation of some of the statistics that Tim shared with us earlier. Thank you. You can sit down. It's a trend that's really stuck, right? The people who like to stay at home on Fridays, they are home on Fridays. And it's a topic that a number of our clients are really quite focused on, particularly people that run large buildings and have these expensive assets they're providing to their workforce and feeling like they're underused on a Friday. So we have an opportunity here. What can we do differently in buildings on these low occupancy days? Can we reduce our carbon footprint, and can we save some money in operations? So we have a client renovating a small office in central London. And during the design of the project, the WSP engineering team proposed a design where the mechanical system on the floor of this building has two zones. From a design perspective, this is a very efficient engineering design, and it gives you flexibility, and it's future-proof when you're designing your building. However, it also means we have the opportunity to just heat half the floor on days when less people are present. So we've designed an experiment to conduct a pilot over several weeks to see how this will work in practice, because as Tim said, how people feel about the places they go is very important. So during the pilot, we'll run heating as normal on one end of the floor, and we'll allow the temperature to vary a little bit on the other end of the floor. So I've got a little model of what that might look like. This was modeling for a winter's day, where you can see the active area of the floor is in orange. The little dots are people at their desks. You can see how it's kind of nice and warm with, we've all got our laptops and our people there. And you can see then as you go down the floor, the temperature slightly cools as you get to the other end of the floor. It won't be hot or cold in the zone that's actively cooled. Intentionally just allowing the set points to vary just a little bit by maybe 3 to 4 degrees as you move away from the active area. We thought this was very important, again, from the user experience standpoint, what it feels like to be in the building during the day. And we've estimated that this is an approach that could reduce the energy expenditure by about 25% on the days in question. As you'll notice, there's an opportunity for the heat to kind of bleed across the floor a little bit. And so then, while this is technically possible, we then come back to the question of users. This is the new challenge. How do we educate the staff on when these days are happening and make sure they're engaged and bought into the process? And like many people, our client is very keen to have their staff in the office. They want them building those interpersonal relationships that will really help drive and deliver their mission. So the communications that were planned as part of the pilot really had to send a very clear message that the space is available, the space is welcoming. Down. Fortunately, our client was also using Flowscape and using it for their staff to book their desks every day. So Flowscape have now created a new feature that will allow us to take advantage of this engineering approach, and the staff can easily know when a low occupancy day is planned. So within this company, the users can book their desks up to 2 weeks in advance using Flowscape. And what they can now do, the operations team can go in ahead of time and they can do a look ahead for a potential low occupancy day and activate the feature in Flowscape for those days. So on those days, as staff start to use the booking system, it'll show only the active zone is available for users to book a desk. Once 80% of the seats are booked, this then triggers an automatic reopening of the second zone, and there's no staff intervention required. It's very important to note that the building remains fully accessible, so staff can access all the normal areas of the floor if they need to find a piece of equipment, if they want to go to their locker, if there's some other reason there might be something down the other end of the floor. It's open, it's available, there's no change to fire plans, all of these conversations. Another important point is within the design, it was important to make sure that the active zone includes everything you could need in your working day. So there's desks, there's meeting rooms, there's collaboration spaces, there's privacy booths, and of course coffee. We're initially going to be piloting this using Fridays, but I think recent rail strikes in London are a really good example of where you might have a low occupancy day that's not standard on a Friday. Another example being the days running up to Christmas, where a lot of people are on leave at the same time. And so finally, I'd like to highlight a couple of key considerations from the user experience point of view. The initial rollout will be very carefully controlled as a 6-week pilot, and this word was very carefully chosen. There'll be communications to staff in advance, there'll be surveys to gather their input ahead of time. There's been a lot of close work with stakeholders around the planning implications and identifying if there's any other areas we can use smart technologies for adjusting things like the lights or other facilities. Another key consideration throughout this is the user experience. The communications are very carefully crafted to show that the primary message is that the office is open, it's welcoming, you can come in and have a productive day here. Engaging with the users is absolutely key, and we'll be taking their feedback ahead of the move and also then during the move and after, during the pilot days. There were observations we've already received about there are teams who actually do come in every day. So making sure that they are in the active zone on the return to the office will be a key consideration. Equally, you might have someone with a modified desk for some reason or a modified chair, and making sure that that is in the active zone and someone is not rolling their chair all the way along the office. But small things like this, when you speak to people, you understand what their needs are and you can take those into account. I like the point Miguel made earlier. I'm going to slightly adapt it and say think big, start small, learn fast, and iterate. Throughout the pilot, the intent is that any feedback we get will influence how the pilot is run the following Friday. So it'll be a very active experiment throughout the process. And finally, modeling and testing the experience. So from a user experience point of view, it's so helpful to sit down and actually say, let's pretend to be this person arriving. What happens? I open this door, then what happens? And walking through that entire journey. Running simulations where we talk about what it feels like or what that journey is like has been really helpful in this process to figure out where the unintended consequences are. We've had lots of lots of engagements with operations teams throughout the process, and the hope is that also in time, as this process becomes well socialized in the office over the course of the pilot, that we can then deploy it on days where we see the analytics showing that it's an opportunity. Depending on the pilot experience, this could be tuned to maybe let the set points vary a bit further and actually save even more money. So this is hybrid working is a socio-cultural change to how we use our office buildings, and I think we're delighted to be able to present this future-ready approach to designing the next generation of office building. And with that, I'll hand over to Peter.
Okay, so now we dig a little bit more into the technical details. So, as Claire said, it's key to create this very good employee experience and not interfere. When we close down parts of the building, it should not interfere with the work that people come there to do. So that's why we did this user experience. And first, it's planning the week together at the office. So there we plan to use the flow planner, where people can mark where they which days they want to come into the office. And we can also mark the anchor days where teams are supposed to be in the office. Then they plan a space together where they can sit. Everyone get an invitation. They get the chance to mark which desk they're going to sit there, so the team can sit together. But desks that are not booked 24 hours before will be released for everyone to book. Then when you come to the office, you're going to get reminded the day that you have booked a desk or are supposed to come to the office. Then you can get wayfinding to get to the desk that you have booked. When you get to the desk, you just plug in your computer, and through a small device, which we call a USB desk dongle, the check-in to the desk is done automatically. No QR code scanning, anything. You confirm that you're in the office by just plugging in the cable. During the day, you can find where people sit, of course, but you can also see with this USB desk sensor if they are at the desk or not. You can also search for people with certain skills like fire aiders, first aiders, fire wardens and things like that. And you also get reminders and wayfinding when you have a meeting. So this was from a user experience. If we look from a management perspective, we plan to do this more manually in the beginning to, in a controlled way, close down parts of the building, like Claire said, Fridays. But going forward, we will also test to do it automatically. But in the beginning, we want to be very clear to the users when we close things down, when we open up, and so on. So then we built this process where we use the sensors to analyze how the office is used. We sit down and see which days can we close down certain zones. We start with closing down a zone for the whole building. So we only have two levels, full building or half building. But we can continue and close down half of floors as well in the future. And then everyone will see on the map in their mobile app, the desk booking app, which part of the floor that is closed down is grayed out there to the right. So this is done every month. So we want to gather a lot of data for this office. So we plan to cover everything, even the toilets, to measure how everything is used. So then we needed to use 4 different types of sensors. So we're going to use room presence sensors, wireless battery supplied sensors for the small meeting rooms, which cannot be divided into more than one meeting room. So it doesn't make sense to analyze if it's 1 or 2 persons there. We're going to use the zone sensors to analyze how many people you have in the large meeting rooms or the soft seating areas, how much people that's using them. We're going to use this USB desk sensor, all the ergonomic desks with a monitor on them, because that's the only thing we need there to connect or to measure if someone is at the desk or not. And then we have other desks where we don't have any monitor. We use these wireless sensors as well. So the message here is that to cover office, it's not one sensor type that you need. You need several sensor types to cover the whole office. So everything is integrated into the BMS system. So when we close down certain areas, it's automatically fed into the BMS system. So the fans, the AVAC and things goes on a slower level when we just control it in the Flowscape system. So we block the desks and automatically the BMS will be turned down to a lower level for that part. And there's a lot of other integrations we need to think about here as well. You have the room booking parts, so the users expect all the AV equipment in the meeting rooms to work as expected, and book things in Outlook as well. So you need to control the booking in Outlook and still use Outlook for the booking of the meeting rooms for all the AV equipment to work as they should do. So this is the first step for us. The next step is that we will even improve the user experience with other features. So adding visitor management, door access, you have heard about this before, food to work, event management and things like that. So we see that the trend now is to, of course the focus is how do we get people back to the office, how do we plan the week at the office. But we see also that larger companies have started to use these workplace experience apps, and we think that's going to be spread to other companies as well. So this is, I think, the future of the workplace IT, that you get everything in an app. So that's everything from Claire and me. So any questions?
I just wanted to ask if you've had any backlash from people when they've got to go into the desk and then it says that they're physically at the desk. And if you have had any backlash, how have you managed that?
I can talk about this in general. I think it's a really interesting topic, right? Do people feel monitored that you're tracking that they're at the desk? I think in the example of the sensors that we use, it's looking at, are you here today or not? It's not looking at, are you at your desk typing right now? Or have you stopped to talk to someone? It applies across pretty much all the smart technologies you could use as a question. I know of a building in Dublin where once you go in, you've opted into this through your employee app, but you can find anyone in the building. I can go in and say, oh, I need an expert on like mortgages or building design. I can type that in, it'll say 3 people with this skill set are in the building right now. But you've opted into that by being one of the users, so you can opt not to have it. In that case, what it does is it tracks if you're in the building. I can figure out what floor you're on and I can sort of see a location dot. But if you go into the bathroom, you disappear off the map, for example. So there's no good answer to that question. I think it's something we're always thinking about as an industry, but I think for a lot of people, it again comes down to, does the benefit you get from it when you're looking for that colleague outweigh the fact that you feel a little bit creepy about it? For most people it works. Some people will opt out and that's fine. But yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that I have a perfect answer.
To see, I get this question a lot if the sensor, do you track me? Do you know where I am and things like that? No, we don't do that. And it's also about you can turn things on and off. But we have one company that we turned everything off. We don't store anything. But then I get a list from, or I get some, we were in a meeting, they asked us, why can't you turn it on again? Because we get this list from the access system. Yeah. Why can't we get the same list from your system? But you told us to turn it off in your system. So you have this information anyway in the workplace, but this is a little bit more obvious when you have a sensor, but it's not about tracking people.
Is your take-up quite good then? Would you say the take-up rate?
I beg your pardon?
Is the take-up rate of people, would you say it's...
Are people embracing it?
Like, yeah, the embracing.
No, it's because usually the desk is not the problem. If you see which desk that you have, that has been known for 50 years. When I started to work 30 years ago, I knew who sat there, who sat there. So it's usually not a big problem, but we also have in our system an indoor positioning system where you see where you are if you sit in the coffee area. That has been very difficult to sell. People say, it's a really nice feature for the office place, but then they never get through the union, or so it's usually stopped. So desk is usually fine, but tracking exactly where you are is usually a little bit problematic.
And probably worth mentioning as well that the majority, all of the occupancy sensor technology in the market, it can tell management how many people are on this floor at this time. It can't say Claire is here, Peter is there, Martin is here. It just gives you a pattern and a picture rather than that specific person level tracking. So from a GDPR perspective, it's good.
I've got a question from Tony Adams, who's watching us on Hop In. Hi, Tony. How are you able to illustrate the return on investment in the technology? Yeah, is it about is the payback the energy saving that you talk about? What about other operating costs like cleaning, security, catering? I think it's more.
Yeah, so for the pilot, I think we're primarily focused on modeling the energy savings because it's the biggest cost, but there are then also knock-on costs of lighting. We're working carefully with the lighting team to make sure that when you come onto the floor, one side is brightly lit and normal and looks inviting, and that's where you go. The other side is safely lit, but might be a little bit dimmer and kind of gives you that visual trigger of, oh, today I go that way. The lights are only at half volume this way. So we'll be tracking those kind of savings because it will be one way to articulate the success of the pilot. But ultimately it comes back to everything Tim talked about. Is it a good office? Are people happy to be there? I think in general, pretty much any technology in a smart building, going back to the long list that Mark presented, it's always about return on investment. And clients only do things if it makes sense in their building and will help them either run it more efficiently or deliver a fantastic experience that makes people want to rent space in that building.
Okay, great stuff. Okay, please, a big thank you to Peter and Claire.